Millions of Americans are heading to the polls today to cast their votes in this year's midterm election. Republicans are hoping to hold on to power while Democrats are looking to shift the tide in both the House and Senate. As it stands, Republicans control the House of Representatives 240 seats to 195. Democrats would need to win 23 seats to gain control. In the Senate, there are 51 Republicans. 49 members are either Democrats or independents who do caucus with Democrats. Joining us now, CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist Joel Payne, as well as CBS News political contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Okay, Leslie, to you, I want to ask what you're hearing on the ground at this point. I know it's early, but what are you hearing? Do Republicans have reason to be optimistic?
Well, it's interesting. There was a Republican National Committee call yesterday, and the president tapped in, and he's basically feeling a lot more bullish on this. He's feeling confident, and especially in some of those swing states with those swing voters, those areas that he was able to turn red that followed President Obama. And that's what's interesting here. I think you're seeing a lot more confidence, certainly not overly confident. But the question is, are there going to be more split ticket voters? People that want to send, that perhaps suburban women, ethnic minorities in southern part of Florida, for example, that will vote for the Republican ticket, but may also vote for a Democratic governor because they want that protest vote and they want a bit more balance. And that's what we're hearing, that it wouldn't be full, straight ticket one way or the other. And that creates opportunity, I think, on both sides of the aisle.
That's really fascinating, because if Leslie is right, I find that people we hear from, also viewers, are just really hardcore one way or the other. Joel, what are you hearing from the Democratic Party?
Well, I would call it cautious optimism. And listen, we had a very interesting chat about this a little while ago, about the idea that I think there's a lot of scar tissue built up, particularly among Democrats, about what happened in 2016. We were all surprised. The political establishment was surprised by Donald Trump. I think we're in a scenario now where there's this unpredictability out there. There's this feeling that the electorate, that you can't really predict it. Well, to be quite honest, the president has had an opportunity to be in front of this electorate either by himself or through surrogate over the last year and a half. And honestly, he's consistently underperformed. And so I think Democrats are feeling like the trend lines are working in their favor. You even look at places where we have opportunities for pickup, like Arizona and Nevada. In Arizona, Democrats cut the early vote lead to lower than it's ever historically been. In Nevada, the Reid machine, which I know very well, feels very confident about turning people out. And even in Florida, where I know Leslie and I have some different takes on what's going on the ground there, Democrats feel ecstatic about Andrew Gillum at the top of the ticket and what he's going to do to mobilize the entire Democratic base, not just the kind of more traditional Democratic base, but even those folks on the outskirts of that base that normally maybe wouldn't show up in a midterm election. Democrats feel really good.
That's probably the big key line to this election is the voters that we're really talking about are not on the fringes, right, are not on the edges, but they're independent. They're kind of soft Democrat, soft Republican that move, that true swing voter, and now they're in swing states and swing districts. So, as you take it all the way down, it's all that fluidity. But what's fascinating, the president is trying to defy a historical norm. A president and party who's below 50% approval rating normally sees the party will lose about 37 seats. And he's trying to really stop that blue wave we talk about. And in some cases, I think he will be effective.
Why do you feel confident? Because a lot of people, the president has been very confident that he's going to buck this midterm trend of losing the House and the Senate.
Sure.
But why do you think Republicans feel confident about
Right. So the headwinds he's headed into are political, they're personality-driven, people are upset, and they're certainly by the economy. So the economy is so strong. When you saw the biggest
it's not what the Republicans are running on this go-around. Right?
But it's the foundation. That's what is really the undercurrent for the wave. If the economy is strong versus what you had in 1994 or 2010, when you saw the big losses in 2010 with Barack Obama losing 63 seats, you had 9 out of 10 people believing it was not a good time to find a quality job. You had consumer confidence extremely low, and the economy was just coming back from the big recession. So this is a very different environment. So if they're thinking about, I don't like the personality of the president, I don't like his style, but I have 2 Supreme Court right of center jurist. He's done things on taxes. He's doing things on tariffs. He's looking at for America. It doesn't mean they like the president. And they may have a protest vote and split a ticket to have the balance, but it does mean it's an underlying factor. They may not talk about it, but it's going to impact this election.
Here's what Democrats are also talking about. The fact that there is more of a 50-state strategy in effect now than there's ever been. Democrats are competitive all across the country. We're not just talking about just those bedroom communities in the Northeast or some of those places out in the West that are kind of traditionally Democratic. We're talking about South Dakota. We could pick up a governor's seat. We're talking about Iowa, where Terry Branstad is an institution there and really had a stranglehold on the state as a Republican standard bearer. Now Fred Hubble could win that governor's race tonight. That's a very real possibility. Kansas, that's a governor's race that Democrats could win. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Florida and Georgia. Democrats feel like finally, for the first time really in a decade, even with President Obama in place, we weren't necessarily competitive all across the country. The entire Democratic establishment feels like we finally now have a blueprint to be competitive all around the country, and it's not something you can necessarily say within the last few cycles.
So if Democrats feel that way, Leslie, do Republicans feel that the coalition that was built for Donald Trump in 2016 still stands, that it'll come through in midterms?
That's the big question tonight. Are establishment Republicans going to come back, hold their nose like they did before, because the president has delivered on those promises? They still do not like the president's style, and that's why I say it's still hold the nose kind of candidate and kind of voting. But they do like some of these other candidates that are on the ticket, and that's a little bit more tried and true Republicans. So in some senses, that's the case. But some of these working class, like blue collar workers that we saw in the Rust Belt, that's going to be the question. That's what I'm watching tonight. Is that part of the coalition going to remain with the president? Because we have learned, for example, in Texas, if you took different non-traditional constituencies, if they voted 3 times for the Republican Party in 3 cycles, they couldn't remember the last time they voted Democrat. And they were our future Republican Party, and that was the perfect case with Latino.
I want to ask you, Leslie, about turnout. What are you hearing at this point about turnout? People are saying we know in midterms not as great turnout, but we're also hearing record number early voters, absentee. What are you hearing from the Republican Party?
Well, there's a lot of excitement, measured excitement. It's Florida. In Florida, and the interesting thing they tell you there is that they've already seen that by 9 a.m. this morning, the Republican turnout had really squashed any type of early voting turnout that the Democrats had had.
What? That's significant. What do you talk when you say talk numbers?
So basically, they say back in 2016, there were 84,000 raw ballots the Democrats had in early voting before the election day. On election day, they closed that and surpassed it by 194,000 votes. So these are still small numbers when you think about such large states with millions of people voting, but they're feeling optimistic about that by 9 a.m. Republican turnout was the machine of the Republican Party in Florida was very active and on steroids. I mean, and that's really kind of the takeaway here. We don't know where those independent voters are going to fall, and so we can't read the tea leaves yet. We have to be very cautious, but it's giving some optimism, especially in South Florida, where a lot of those competitive seats are.
Joel, when you talk about turnout, what have Democrats been worried about when it comes to turnout?
Well, I mean, look outside. There's a rainstorm here in New York City, and that's not the only place, right? There's some other key areas along the eastern seaboard that are experiencing difficult weather, and I think that was certainly a concern. I think, some of those washouts have kind of gone away. But, and Leslie knows this, we planned for situations like this. I remember I was on the Hillary campaign in 2016. There was a terrible hurricane about a month before in North Carolina where there were certain places in that state where there was only one voting district within 50 miles of people. So we had to put out aggressive radio campaigning where we told people about where their backup location was or where they go if they couldn't find their location. So again, despite the fact that people might be a little bit concerned about things like weather, there are plans in place to make sure that people have, contingency options for situations like that.
You talk about weather. I want to also ask you about Florida. Let's say Andrew Gillum wins in Florida. What would you extract as the takeaway in the state of Florida on how to beat Donald Trump?
Well, I would say that Andrew Gillum has created a new Democratic coalition in the state of Florida. And by the way, that would be a significant scalp if Andrew Gillum could say, I beat Donald Trump. Because if Andrew Gillum wins tonight, I don't think the story is Andrew Gillum beat Ron DeSantis. I think the story is Andrew Gillum beat Donald Trump. And for people in my party who are, let's just say, looking for a candidate in 2020, I don't think that's going to be something that is lost on many of the party elders who are thinking about who the future of the Democratic Party is going to be. He is going to activate voters, again, not just the traditional Democratic coalition, but those people in South Florida, Haitian communities, Caribbean communities that, some people, frankly, would say that the Hillary campaign did not do a good enough job of activating in 2016, one of the reasons why the president won. Andrew Gillum has an opportunity to really overperform in some of those areas and turn those folks out in a way that's not just going to benefit him, but also benefit people down ticket like Bill Nelson.
Leslie, I want to ask you about South Florida as much
I disagree with
she does. She does.
I also want to get to South Florida. I want to, before we go, though, get to the Hispanic vote down in South Florida, particularly the Republican Hispanic vote. What are you seeing?
So what we're hearing, I would say, from GOP operatives on the ground right now is that the Republican Party has done a really good job of trying to solidify not only just Cuban Hispanic, but talking about like non-Cuban Hispanic, the Puerto Rican community, the Venezuelan, more Latin American-oriented communities, which are very vibrant part of the business and cultural community in South Florida. But two particular races, Florida 26 with Carlos Curbelo, who is running in an area that Hillary Clinton won by almost 20 points, but he won, even though Trump lost the state, he won by 10 points. So I do feel much more optimistic on his. He's one of those that's in the toss-up, and the Democrats are very competitive. And also the former seat of Ileana Ross-Layton, who'd been there 29 years, the first Hispanic Republican to Congress, female. She has a very famous news anchor that has the Republican nominee, and a lot of people like her because they are calling that the cultural identity race. She is connecting one-on-one with the Jewish community and a lot of different communities that have unique needs, and they don't feel that type of retail politics is what Donna Shalala, her competitor, the former head cabinet member from the Clinton administration, is doing to win and earn their respect.
Really quickly, one House race to watch in Georgia, the Georgia 6, which is the famous John Ossoff race versus Karen Handel. Karen Handel's now the representative. Well, guess what? Lucy McBath is running against her, and that similar effect I talk about in Florida with Andrew Gillum, you could experience the same thing with Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Very strong organization, somebody who could pull someone like Lucy McBath over the top against a very popular Karen Handel as well.
Joel Payne, Leslie Sanchez, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.